Please buy our puppy," the little girl whispered. She didn't know he was the CEO who'd fired her mom last month. Nathan Cole, 36 and newly appointed CEO, stepped out of the sleek black sedan into the crisp air of a late Friday afternoon. The wind bit at his collar as he tightened his coat and checked his phone. The screen glowed with unanswered emails, spreadsheets, and meeting alerts. He had just ended a brutal call with the board, sharp voices demanding tighter cost control, accelerated layoffs, more profit, less patience. Trim the fat, they said. Make tough decisions. He had nodded, agreed, even though something inside him resisted. Another restructuring memo waited in his inbox, another name he would have to sign off on. He started toward the glass doors of the corporate building when a small voice, fragile yet clear, called from the sidewalk. "Please buy our puppy." He stopped, turned. A little girl stood at the corner near the bus stop, half hidden behind a crooked cardboard sign. She could not have been more than 5. Her coat was bubblegum pink but faded, sleeves too long, fraying at the wrists. Her blonde hair peeked out from under a knit hat, and in her small arms she clutched a tiny cream-colored puppy wrapped in a scarf. Beside her, the sign read in shaky, hand-painted letters, "For sale our puppy, please help." Nathan approached cautiously, unsure why his feet were moving. The girl looked up with solemn blue eyes that didn't flinch or beg. She extended the puppy slightly. "His name is Muffin," she said softly. "My mom said if we sell him, we can buy medicine and some food." Nathan stared at her, stunned into silence. No tears, no whimpering, just quiet determination. It was the most mature voice he had heard all day. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp bill, but before he could hand it over, the girl shook her head. "I can't take the money unless you take Muffin too," she said seriously. "That's the deal." A strange pressure tightened in Nathan's chest. He knelt down and gently extended his arms. Muffin sniffed at him, then curled into his coat with a soft whimper. Nathan felt the dog's tiny heart beating fast. The girl stepped closer, and for a moment their faces were inches apart. Their eyes met, and just then he noticed the faded patch on her coat sleeve, a stitched emblem, Grow and Care, the same volunteer program his company had proudly funded for years, the same program he had cut 2 quarters ago to save overhead. He froze. He remembered signing the termination order. It had seemed like a numbers decision at the time, a footnote. Now it stared back at him in the form of a little girl, trying to sell her dog for medication and groceries. "I'll take good care of him," he said finally. Her expression softened. She handed over a folded piece of the cardboard sign. "Please sign here, so I know it's official." He blinked, took the pen from his pocket, and signed below her printed message. Then he handed her the sign and held Muffin as gently as he could. That was when a woman's voice, urgent but soft, called out, "Avery." He turned and saw a woman walking briskly toward them. She had pale skin, tied-back blonde hair, and a worn gray coat. Her posture was tired, but her steps were fast. She reached the girl, Avery, and hugged her tightly before glancing at Nathan. Her eyes fell on Muffin. She hesitated. "Thank you for buying him," she said quietly, meeting his gaze. "My daughter. She loves that dog more than anything. Please, just take care of him. I'll come back when I can. I want to buy him back." She didn't explain further. Didn't ask for names. Just nodded once, took Avery's hand and walked away, her shoulders stiff against the wind. Nathan stood there for a long moment. In one hand he held Muffin, in the other a cardboard signature and a quiet burden. He turned toward the building again, but it didn't feel the same. His world had just shifted, slightly, but enough. He had come to work thinking about numbers. Now all he could see was a little girl in a pink coat and a mother who had promised to return for something she loved. Nathan sat in his car, the engine idling, eyes fixed on the dashboard but seeing none of it. The faint image of the logo on the girl's sleeve burned behind his eyelids. Grow and Care. a program designed to help employee families during hard times, once touted as a symbol of company values, now a line item slashed under his leadership. He had called it non-essential during a Q4 review. Now it had a face, a small, determined face with pale blue eyes and a pink jacket. Back at the office, Nathan bypassed his assistant, went straight into his corner suite, and shut the door. He didn't even take off his coat. He sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, and logged into the internal HR system. His fingers moved with urgency, pulling up records from the last round of layoffs, specifically from the customer service department. There it was, Melissa Harper, 31, terminated effective last month. Termination reason: failure to enforce proper escalation protocols during a system failure, resulting in temporary loss of service and client dissatisfaction. Recommendations submitted by Travis Benton, Head of Operations. Final signatory, Nathan Cole, CEO. His own signature. He stared at it for several seconds. He remembered the meeting, Travis presenting charts, graphs, lost estimates. No one had mentioned Melissa's previous record, or even brought up a defense. It had been fast, sanitized, necessary, they said. But something tugged at him now. He opened another window, Customer Feedback Archives. He filtered for Melissa Harper's name. Page after page loaded. Melissa was the only one who stayed on the phone with me when my daughter was in the hospital. Please thank Melissa for her patience. She turned my entire day around. Promotion worthy. Her average rating, 4.9 out of 5. He leaned back in his chair, breath caught halfway. None of this had been in the termination briefing. No context, no balance, just performance graphs and red numbers. No one had mentioned she was one of their most beloved team members. He clicked into the benefits system. Melissa had declined COBRA continuation, no unemployment appeal, no health reimbursement. She had taken her termination and vanished quietly. That told him something else. Pride. Or exhaustion. Or both. Digging deeper, he opened the internal dashboard tracking customer service satisfaction metrics. He narrowed the date range to post Melissa's termination. The red bar appeared instantly. Overall satisfaction had dropped by 11.7%. Coincidence? Maybe. But his gut said no. Then came the more difficult part. He searched her employee profile photo. There she was, blonde, slight, with tired eyes but a kind smile. His chest tightened. That was Avery's mother. The woman who had appeared at the last moment earlier, thanking him softly and promising she would come back for the puppy. He remembered the way she had held her daughter. The pause before she spoke. She had not pleaded, just asked one thing: take care of Muffin. As though that were the only piece of dignity she could afford to preserve. He opened her full file, years of performance, awards, emails from clients, notes from previous supervisors. One comment read, "Melissa is the quiet engine of this team. She holds us together." Why hadn't he seen any of this? Why had it not been presented? A bitter thought settled in. Because it had not served the agenda. Because when Travis pushed for cuts, anyone slowing down the machinery, even for the sake of people, was labeled inefficient. Nathan's jaw tightened. He ran a hand down his face. His mind circled around the same questions, over and over. If Melissa was at fault, why had no one backed her in her file? Why had the customers loved her? Why was there such silence from her after the termination? Because maybe she had been used. Maybe the blame had been convenient. And maybe, he realized with growing clarity, he had failed her. He clicked open a fresh document, began taking notes. He had signed off on ending someone's livelihood, someone raising a daughter who now stood in the cold, trying to sell her best friend for a bottle of medicine. And the more he read, the clearer it became. It should not have happened. He needed to know more. He needed to face the consequences of the decision that, until this morning, had been just another name on a screen. Nathan returned to the supermarket entrance, clutching Muffin safely in a soft carrier draped with his coat and a small bag of dog food in his free hand. He had decided it was time to see Avery again, not to take Muffin, but to give him back, along with enough food to last a week. The puppy needed a home, not custody. He walked through the automatic doors, scanning for the little girl in the pink coat. Avery was still there, though she no longer held a for sale sign. Instead, she stood barefoot on the cold tile, distributing leaflets to passers-by, pink flyers advertising that her mother was looking for work. He stopped and watched from a few feet away until she recognized him, and Muffin's soft whine echoed inside the carrier. Her eyes widened in shock and relief. "You bought Muffin yesterday," she said quietly, as though remembering a dream. He knelt calmly and unzipped the carrier. Muffin tumbled out and scampered toward her with a tentative wag. "Muffin remembers you," Nathan said softly. "He asked me to bring him back to you. He misses you, Avery. This is his food. You take care of him now, okay?" He offered the bag of kibble. The simplicity and sincerity in his words seemed to surprise her. Avery lifted Muffin into her arms. She stared at him, lips trembling. Then, without prompting, she handed Nathan a flyer from her small stack. It was a request for job assistance. "My mother is very good but cannot find work. Please help her find a job so our family can be okay." The scrawl was neat but fragile, like the hope behind it. He studied the words carefully. "Your mother is very good." Not a plea, just acknowledgement. He felt the depth of that statement settle over him. She had no corporate context, no legal logic. She only knew her mother deserved better, and she was trying, however small her power, to help. He reached into his coat and pulled out a pen and a business card from his pocket. On the blank side of the card he scribbled, "I will try." He pressed it into her hand. She held it with wide-eyed awe, as though it might dissolve. A crisp gust of wind stirred at the entrance. He narrowed his voice. "Your mother is lucky to have someone like you." She nodded, blinking rapidly, hugging Muffin and the food against her chest. "He is your puppy. He belongs here," he repeated, "until things are better." Then he looked more closely at the job flyer she had made. Her flyer included her mother's name, Melissa Harper. Nathan's breath caught. Recognizing the name that had haunted his decisions these past hours, he suddenly felt the full weight of responsibility. Can I meet your mom?" he asked quietly. Avery hesitated, glanced at Muffin's eager face, then stepped back while keeping hold of the puppy. She led him by the hand, weaving between shoppers toward a small corridor at the side of the store. When they reached a modest door marked Suite 5C, she knocked softly and motioned him in. Inside was a modest room, a low table, a few mismatched chairs, a stack of cleaning rags in a corner, and a woman seated on a small couch. Her hair was golden and pulled into a loose ponytail, and her eyes were red-rimmed, as though she had been crying. She hugged Avery tight when she entered, then saw Nathan standing in the doorway with Muffin in the bag. Avery softly introduced him. "Mom, this is the man who bought Muffin so he would be safe. He said Muffin remembers me." The mother lifted her eyes to Nathan, her expression guarded. She held Muffin carefully, pressing him into her arms. Nathan didn't need to say his name. The recognition in her face said she already knew. "You're Nathan Cole," she said flatly. "CEO." He gave a small nod. "Yes, I am." She stared for a long second, then pushed the door open just wide enough to stand firmly in the threshold. Her other hand clutched the edge of the door. "So," she said, voice cold and measured, "you've come to see the fallout of your signature in person?" Nathan swallowed, taken aback not by the harshness of her tone, but by the dignity in it. She did not shout, did not accuse. She simply stood there, with tired eyes and a grip on her daughter's shoulder, as if shielding Avery from something invisible. "I came to apologize," he said, voice soft. and to listen, if you'll let me." Melissa shook her head, but not out of anger. She seemed more like someone bracing against a bitter wind. "You read a report," she said, "and you believed it." Nathan stepped back slightly. "I did," he admitted. "And I didn't ask the right questions." "You didn't ask any questions," she said, her voice tightening now. "No one asked me what happened. No one asked why a process failed or what I tried to do to stop it. They just needed someone to point to, and I had no one in the room to point back." Nathan lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry. That's not good enough, I know. But I'm here because I realized, too late, that what I signed took more than just a job from you." Melissa inhaled deeply, blinking hard. Avery tugged gently at her mother's sleeve, and she held her close, shielding her instinctively. "I do not need your pity," Melissa said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't need apologies whispered at my doorstep. I needed someone in that room to look past the data, past the deadline, past the pressure, and see the person who had served that company with everything she had." There was a pause. Then Nathan, without saying a word, reached into his satchel and pulled out a small, weathered leather notebook. He handed it to her, silently. Melissa opened it cautiously. Inside were handwritten notes, thank you letters from customers, names, stories, small gestures of appreciation she had once received and carefully saved. Her own handwriting was on some of the margins, reminders, follow-ups, customer birthdays. "You kept this?" she asked, brows furrowed. "It was still in your old desk," he said. "They were going to toss it during the office clean-out. I saw your name in the corner, and I knew I couldn't let it be discarded." She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, flipping a page with trembling fingers. "I didn't come to fix everything," Nathan said quietly. "I know I can't undo what's been done, but I can begin listening now. I can begin correcting what I helped break." Melissa set the notebook down on a small side table. She wrapped both arms around Avery, pulling her in close. Her expression softened, but only a little. "You know what hurts the most?" she said, voice cracking just slightly. "It's not losing the paycheck. It's waking up every morning and having to convince my daughter that I didn't do something wrong, that her mom isn't broken." Nathan's throat tightened. "You are not broken." She looked at him with a tired, searching gaze. "You still think words fix things?" "No," he said, "but actions might." "Martin threw me." Melissa finally stepped back from the doorway. "Then come back tomorrow," she said, not unkindly, but not to talk. "Come back with a real reason." "I will," Nathan said. She nodded once, then began to close the door. Just before it shut, her voice came through again, softer this time. "And bring the same honesty you brought tonight." The door clicked shut. Nathan stood on the porch in silence for a long time. Then he turned and walked to his car, carrying with him the weight of a woman's dignity and the responsibility to do something more than regret. Nathan was reviewing quarterly feedback reports when his assistant knocked gently on his office door. "Mr. Cole, there's a little girl here. She says her name is Avery, and she brought a puppy?" Nathan's pen froze mid-stroke. "Send her in," he said, already rising to his feet. The door opened, and there she was. Avery, her blonde hair tied in a messy ponytail, cheeks flushed from the walk, arms cradling Muffin like he was made of glass. Behind her, Melissa stood silently in the hallway, hesitating just outside the threshold. She gave Nathan a brief, guarded nod. Avery marched up to the desk, determination in every step. "Muffin wanted to visit," she said solemnly. "He missed you, but I think he mostly just wanted to say thank you." Nathan smiled gently. "Thank me. I should be thanking him." Avery reached into her backpack and pulled out a small cardboard box, worn at the edges and wrapped with a pink ribbon. She placed it next to Muffin on Nathan's desk. "This is for you," she said. "Mom didn't know I was bringing it, but I think you should have it." Nathan looked from the box to the girl, then to Melissa, who had now stepped halfway into the room, her expression unreadable. "May I open it?" he asked. Avery nodded. Inside the box were several old photographs. Melissa at company events, surrounded by smiling co-workers and customers. In one picture, she held a handmade thank you card from a young customer who had scribbled in colorful crayon, "Ms. Melissa is the nicest helper ever." Tucked beneath the photos was a single folded card. Nathan opened it carefully. The handwriting was elegant, slightly faded with time. "Melissa, thank you for staying late to help me find my lost order. You didn't have to, but you did, and it meant the world to me. You're not just a worker. You're the reason I stayed with this company. Bless you." Nathan swallowed hard. "I found those in Mom's drawer," Avery said quietly. "I thought maybe you forgot who she was, so I wanted to remind you." Melissa looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. "Avery," she whispered, embarrassed. But Nathan shook his head. "No," he said, voice thick. "She did the right thing." He sat down slowly, holding the note in both hands. The weight of it, more than any quarterly metric or executive briefing, pressed into his chest like a stone. "She kept every one of these," he said aloud, mostly to himself. "She saved them. Because they mattered," Avery said. "And she thought she mattered too, before." There was a silence in the room that neither Melissa nor Nathan rushed to fill. Muffin let out a small yawn and curled up on a corner of the desk like he belonged there. Then Avery added softly, "I think Muffin brought you to our house because my mom deserves to be loved again." Melissa's breath caught. Her eyes shimmered as she turned quickly away, hiding the emotion on her face. Nathan leaned forward, his elbows resting on the edge of the desk. "He's a very smart dog." Avery smiled, then gently kissed Muffin on the head. "I told him he did good." Nathan looked at Melissa. Really looked at her. She still stood with arms crossed, wary, her shoulders tense from holding it all in too long. But beneath the guarded exterior was someone who had given more than her fair share, and had carried the cost in silence. "I do not know what happens next," Nathan said, his voice low, sincere. "But I know I cannot look away now." Melissa met his eyes. For the first time since he arrived at her doorstep, she did not look away. Avery reached for her mom's hand. "Can we go now, Mama?" Melissa nodded. "Yes, baby." They turned to leave, but Nathan called out gently, "Wait." He picked up the small box again and held it out toward Melissa. "I'd like to keep this, just for a while." Melissa hesitated, then nodded. Nathan watched them walk out of his office, Avery skipping, Muffin wagging his tail behind her. And he sat there, alone again, holding a box full of forgotten praise and a heart that, slowly, had begun to remember what it meant to care. The boardroom was colder than usual that morning, and not because of the air conditioning. Nathan stood at the head of the long glass table, hands braced on its edge, facing a semicircle of skeptical, tight-lipped executives. "I'm proposing we reinstate Melissa Harper," he said clearly, not to her previous position, but to a new role, Senior Advisor for Customer Experience. It's a position tailored to her strengths. A murmur rippled through the room. One of the older board members leaned forward. "You mean the woman who was dismissed last month? For failing to respond to a system-wide glitch that cost us 4 major clients?" Nathan nodded. "The same one. But I've looked deeper. She did not fail. She was the scapegoat. And that cost us more than clients. It cost us integrity." "That's a slippery slope," said another director. "If we allow former employees to return just because someone feels bad, we invite chaos. How do we explain it to the rest of the staff?" Nathan took a breath. "With the truth. We explain that this company values competence, loyalty, and humanity, and that when we make a mistake, we fix it. A woman from HR frowned. Even if you're right about her, the precedent is dangerous. It could weaken our termination process. Nathan stepped around the table, pacing slowly. Do you know what has happened to customer satisfaction since Melissa left? Down by 12%. That is not a dip. That's a statement. He clicked the remote in his hand. The screen lit up behind him, displaying charts, feedback reports, testimonials. A pattern had formed, a pattern he could no longer ignore. She wasn't just answering phones, Nathan continued. She was anchoring a team. She was the reason we had loyal clients who stayed through multiple pricing changes. She made people feel heard. Another board member shook his head. You sound like this is personal. It is, Nathan said, locking eyes with him. Because I signed the termination without asking a single question. I rubber-stamped a report instead of understanding the person behind it. I made it impersonal, and that was the mistake. There was a long pause. Someone at the far end of the table spoke, arms crossed. And now you want to overturn an official decision because of what? A feeling? No, Nathan said evenly. Because of facts. Because we're not a better company without her. And because the future we're trying to build needs more people like her, not fewer. His voice rang louder, sharper across the room. We need more Melissas, not fewer. We need people who care enough to stay late, to take calls on weekends, to remember that behind every complaint is a human being who trusted us with something they paid for. Melissa Harper is not our liability. She's the part of us we should be proud of. Silence followed, thick, awkward, and charged. Then came the backlash. You can't run a company on sentiment. His rules matter. This sets a dangerous tone for every manager we have. Nathan listened to every word. He did not argue. He waited. Then he said, quietly but firmly, That is why I'm not asking you to fund her return. I will. They all looked at him. I'm allocating a portion of the CEO discretionary fund to cover her re-entry, training, and the creation of this new advisory role. It won't touch operational budgets. I take full responsibility. A younger board member blinked. You'd do that? Nathan nodded. Yes, because leadership is not about never being wrong. It's about having the courage to correct it. Another long silence. Then a quiet, reluctant voice. What if it works? Nathan allowed himself a faint smile. Then we all win. There were no applause, no warm pats on the back. Just a quiet acceptance that something irreversible had happened in that room. A shift, not only in policy, but in principle. He left the meeting carrying nothing but a quiet fire in his chest and a name he could finally say with pride. Melissa Harper, Senior Advisor for Customer Experience. A role designed for someone who had never stopped caring, even when the company did. Melissa started her new position with a cautious hope. The title, Senior Advisor for Customer Experience, sounded prestigious, but it was the respect behind it that truly mattered. For the first time in weeks, she walked into an office where no one looked at her like a burden. Her small workspace overlooked the street, and on her desk sat a nameplate Nathan had custom ordered. Melissa Harper, Voice of the Customer. Nathan visited her often, not as her superior, but as someone who wanted to understand. Sometimes he came just to ask, "Are you doing okay today?" The simplicity of the question undid something tight in Melissa's chest. It was not about reports or data. It was about her. They began sharing lunch once a week, usually on Thursdays. Melissa brought homemade meals, leftovers from Avery's favorites. Nathan, who used to eat cold sandwiches between meetings, now looked forward to her warm casseroles and seasoned rice. One afternoon, he said, "This is the first lunch I've actually finished in a long time," and smiled in that boyish way she found harder and harder to ignore. One evening, Melissa forgot her tote bag in the break room. Nathan found it and, intending only to return it, caught sight of a small notebook sticking out. Curiosity got the better of him. Inside were handwritten notes from customers, thank you cards, little scribbles of gratitude. Some dated back years. One note read, "Melissa, thank you for treating me like a person, not a problem. You made a bad day bearable." Nathan read each word like a quiet confession, then closed the notebook and returned it to her desk without saying a word. Later that week, he noticed her struggling with a squeaky chair in her office. "Let me take a look," he offered. Before she could protest, Nathan knelt beside the chair, examining the wheels and the armrest with practiced hands. "Summer job in college," he explained, smiling. "My dad taught me how to fix things, wood, furniture, small engines. Said every CEO should know how to build a chair before leading a boardroom." Melissa watched, smiling, as he tightened the screws with focus. That chair never squeaked again. Together they also began rewriting policy guidelines, ones that would protect single parents, offer emotional support during layoffs, and allow space for second chances. "Why are you so thorough with this?" Nathan asked one night as they worked late. Melissa replied softly, "Because I know what it's like to cry alone at your kitchen table, wondering how to explain hunger to a child without saying the word poor. No one should feel that powerless." Then came Bring Your Inspiration to Work Day. Nathan insisted Avery be a part of it. Melissa hesitated, but Avery arrived with pride in her step, her hair tied up with a pink ribbon and Muffin trotting beside her in a tiny red bandana. That afternoon, the staff gathered in the break room, where each employee shared stories of those who inspired them. Avery stood nervously in front of the crowd, clutching a drawing of her family. "My mom is my hero," she said in a small voice, "because even when people were mean, she stayed kind. Even when we had to sell Muffin, she said we were still lucky because we had each other." She glanced at Nathan, then at Melissa. "And Muffin came back, and Mommy smiles again. I don't know if puppies have magic, but ever since we met you, Mommy and Muffin and I, we laugh more." The room was silent. Then came quiet applause. Nathan blinked quickly, trying to hide the sting in his eyes. Melissa held Avery close, her heart full and trembling. It was no longer just about restoring a job. It was about rebuilding dignity, about weaving kindness back into corners where cold policy had once ruled. And somewhere between shared meals, fixed chairs, and whispered thanks, something deeper was growing. Something Melissa was almost ready to believe in again. It was a cool Saturday evening when Nathan strolled through the quiet park with Melissa and Avery. Muffin trotted ahead, tail wagging with excitement. Avery skipped between them, one hand in her mother's, the other swinging freely. "Muffin has a baby brother now," she giggled. "Maybe we can sell one again, huh?" Melissa blushed and chuckled. "She still thinks people who buy puppies fall in love with the seller," she said, glancing at Nathan. Nathan paused beneath the soft glow of the streetlight. "I may not know much about puppies," he said, smiling, "but I know I chose the right woman." His voice was steady, sincere. They walked on in silence, the quiet comforting. As they reached Melissa's front steps, Nathan hesitated. Melissa turned to him, her keys in hand. "I don't know if I'm someone Avery can rely on," he said honestly. "But I want to try. If you'll let me." Melissa's expression softened, but her voice trembled. "I'm scared. Avery's already attached to you. If this falls apart—" "I understand," Nathan said gently. "I'm not asking for blind trust. Just a chance." She paused, then stepped aside. "Come in. You're already here anyway." The next morning, Nathan returned with a small velvet pouch. Inside was a silver bracelet, old but polished. He handed it to Melissa. "It was my mother's," he said. "She had courage engraved on the inside. She used to say, 'If someone makes you want to be better, don't let them go.' That's what you and Avery did for me." Melissa held the bracelet carefully. "You keep surprising me." "And one more thing," Nathan added. He knelt beside Muffin and clipped a new tag to his collar. Melissa leaned closer to read it. "Belong?" she whispered. Nathan took her hands. "It's what you've always deserved. You just forgot for a while." That afternoon, they drove to a quiet meadow just outside the city. Flowers danced in the breeze, sunlight warming the grass. Avery laughed as she ran through the field, Muffin bounding after her. Watching her daughter, Melissa turned to Nathan. She hasn't smiled like this in a long time. Nathan squeezed her hand. "We're building something that lasts." Avery ran back, windblown and beaming, and leaned into Nathan. She looked up at him and whispered, "This time Mommy doesn't lose her job again, right?" Nathan kissed her forehead. "Not this time, sweetheart. Not ever again." As the sun dipped low, casting gold across the field, Nathan looked at Melissa. Her eyes met his, not with fear, but with hope. And everything made sense. The puppy, the pink jacket, the second chance. It had all started with a whispered sentence. "Please buy our puppy." And it ended with three hearts finally knowing they belonged. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest truths. A little girl selling her puppy did not just touch a man's heart. She reminded him of the kind of leader and the kind of human he wanted to be. If this story moved you, if it made you believe again in second chances, in quiet courage, and in the kind of love that grows from compassion, then please, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Because here we tell stories that heal, stories that matter, and stories that just might change the way you see the world. See you in the next one.